the wave, and we took the
what?
The actors.
Would you like to tell us about it?
No. We took the actors to Yad Vashem. I took the actors to Yad Vashem, and one of them, the last one, the main character, decided he was going to stay there a bit longer, and we're calling, and eventually, maybe half an hour before, he's just coming out of Yad Vashem, half an hour before the actual performance. And I was thinking, we've got about 250 school kids here. I'm not doing the part.
Who's the Rabbi Dr?
Mr. Ross. He got so wrapped up, he was spent about 5 or 6 hours in the other show.
Really great shit.
Yes, yeah. Okay, so I think are we rolling?
Yeah.
Okay. So so we like to actually, first of all, I'd like to wish my Maury a happy birthday, because I'd like to say that he's the one who's got me into all of this learning. So happy birthday to Morris. Second of all, thank you very much, Haviva, for coming all the way, 2 hours drive from Hannaton. Is that true?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Well, so, but before we talk about you, also thank you, Judith and Jack, for once again hosting. Really, very, very appreciated. And Haviva, who I'm sure everybody knows and has read about, is a legend in her own pajamas here in Jerusalem, even though she now lives in Hannaton. But Rabbi Dr will tell you a bit more about who she is, and being the first Orthodox ordained female rabbi, or one of them. And also the tzedakah for this week. We've got a bit of tzedakah to give over still for Eleled from last week, which was a great self-defense shiur. Anybody who's interested, talk to me about it afterwards. And then afterwards we're going to give to Lotem, and Haviva will tell you more about Lotem. So take it away.
Okay. Can we move the flower?
Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
Beautiful as they are.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so how long?
At least an hour. An hour.
Okay. So yes, so it's really nice to see some friendly faces, and some women from a group that inspired the writing of this book. So first of all, I should say that although my ordination is from an Orthodox rabbi, I call myself a post-denominational rabbi, or post-denominational is what I like. And I should tell you what Lotem is also. So that Lotem is an organization that's located near where I live, Kibbutz Hannaton, and they do nature activities and trips for people with special needs. And they have there's Nachal HaShofet near Yoknam, near where I live, and they turn the whole Nachal. They have like a walking path that's all wheelchair accessible. It's really beautiful. So if you're ever up in my area, okay. So in the hour maybe that I have, I'm going to talk about this book and about the mikveh that I run at Hannaton, which is a very special mikveh. And 2 hours is really not so far away from Jerusalem, so you're all welcome to come up and see it, use it. I was told also it's supposed to be learning, kind of. So, and I didn't bring source sheets to study, but we're going to be talking about things that are about Judaism, and so. I consider it learning, even if we're not actually looking at source sheets. Okay. So, this book, and actually, there's a camera there. There's another book under this book. There's 2 other books that I was going to show you. Sorry.
Maybe read some of the other books. So
there's that.
It's in the kitchen, so you can still power the camera.
And the other one I'll just point to, the one that's on top, that's mine. But this one is a book that I wrote that came out in 2000, And it's also a memoir. These are both memoirs. And the one that came out in 2000, Life on the Fringes, is about more about my decision to study to get Orthodox rabbinic ordination. And that book deals a lot with halachot of mostly dealing with women in Judaism. So also if you like learning, then buy that one too, because there's a lot of sources in there, halakhic sources. And it's a book that's it's memoir, but I interweave a lot of halakhic sources about women's issues into the book, into my story. And as I wrote that book when I was very much part of my decision to get Orthodox rabbinic ordination had to do with also, I grew up Orthodox in New York, and I was really wrestling with what it meant to be a feminist and also to be traditionally Jewish or traditional Jew, and mostly around issues, women's issues. And at one point I decided that in order to still be a traditional Jew, I needed to take on the mitzvot that women are exempt from, which are talit and tefillin. Those are the big two that people usually associate with the mitzvot that women are exempt from. Even though there's also shofar and saying Kriyat Shema, those are also on the list. But those people usually feel much more comfortable with women performing, sitting in a sukkah. But talit and tefillin are two biggies that a lot of people do not feel comfortable with women performing, people who are essentially in the Orthodox world. And my decision to take on those mitzvot was a big part of my decision to come back to being a traditional Jew that I was when I was wrestling with that. And so that book really deals a lot with halakha and with Jewish law. And in that stage in my life, that is what I think I really considered, that's real Judaism. Having grown up Orthodox, it was very much about like what the men were doing. Felt to me like that's really authentic Judaism. To see my father praying every morning with tefillin so intently, and there was nothing really comparable that I could see in what my mother was doing that had that same kind of weight. I mean, she did light Shabbat candles, that's true, which is in this book. So that's that book, and as I said, I also took on Torah study or study of Talmud very seriously at that stage, and that's when I was studying to become a rabbi. That's what I was studying mostly. It was pretty much all day studying Talmud and halakha and Jewish law. And so then the year before I was going to be getting the ordination from a rabbi in Jerusalem, Aryeh Strukovsky, I felt like I had been neglecting a whole other side of Judaism, and I felt like before I can get ordination, I need to really delve into that side more, that I had really been valuing what I would consider more like the male side of Judaism, or things that are associated more with men. And I took on a project the year before I was getting ordination to look into the three women's mitzvot, they're called. Chala and Chala, Nida, and Hadlakat Tanyag. So that's, Chala isn't baking challah. Really, it's when you bake bread, you're supposed to separate a portion of the bread and set it aside, and it was supposed to be for the priests, but or the Kohanim. But since we don't give it to Kohanim today, so you just burn it in the oven or just get rid of it so nobody will eat it. So that's challah. But I looked into that actual mitzvah, but also the act of baking and of doing more domestic kind of activities. And the second one is nida, which is the menstrual laws, and I deal a lot with that in the actual book, but also with mikveh itself, and that leads into the what I do now, running this mikveh. And the last one is Hadlakat Haner, and that's lighting Shabbat candles. And in that chapter, I deal a lot with Shabbat itself also. But this journey, it was a year-long journey where I was studying about these mitzvot, and I was really trying to create a relationship with these mitzvot that I felt that I had not only neglected, but also devalued. That I not only neglected, but devalued, meaning that I thought that, as I said, like putting on tefillin it felt to me like more important than lighting Shabbat candles, let's say. So the story starts with, at the same time, I was part of a Rosh Chodesh group in Jerusalem, which I see some of the people from the group here. And just at that same time, the group was disbanding. A few people were leaving the country, and it had been meeting for many years. And then a smaller part of the group, decided to meet more frequently and to do something different. And so, because I had this project in mind that I wanted to do, I suggested that we, as a group, look into these 3 women's mitzvot. Do you remember this? And so we decided to start with challah. And we had a challah baking group. It was every other Thursday. And we studied and we did all kinds of body work too. Brima, right? Do you still do that? Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm wondering if I should read, because I see I didn't expect all these people from the group to be here. I'm wondering if I should read apart from that. And so there's let me explain how the book is structured also. It starts off with practice, but then I have there's a lot of quotes in the book as well, and another thing is that quotes from Jewish sources. But as I said, in the first book I had a lot of halachic material, and this book I have a lot of midrash and Kabbalah and Chassidut, which is, as I said, that I felt that I had been neglecting this other side of Judaism. Part of that was also that I had been spending so much time studying Jewish law, studying Halakha and Talmud, and I really had not spent much time studying these other types of Jewish sources, like Chassidut and Kabbalah. And so during that year, I also spent a lot more time with that. And the book starts with some of my baggage, as an Orthodox woman, as I grew up. For instance, here. There are 3 sins for which women die in childbirth: a lack of care with regard to nidah, challah, and the lighting of the Shabbat lamp. That's from a Mishnah in Tractate Shabbat. So, as I said, I was coming at these 3 mitzvot. It wasn't as though I was coming at them with just totally, like open arms and love. And I had a lot of baggage about these 3 mitzvot, which is, I think, one reason why I kind of avoided creating a relationship with them. And this is a source that every Friday night, when I was growing up, we would say this in Beit Knesset, in synagogue, during Bad Madlikim, you would read this source every Friday night. Every Friday night saying that if women were not careful performing these 3 mitzvot, they would die in childbirth. The way I see this source now, I see you're looking puzzled at me, so I guess I can say that that the way I understand it now is that the rabbis wrote this threat to women really because these are 3 mitzvot. What they have in common is that they're mostly women who are performing them. It's really the responsibility of the woman, more or less, to make sure that they're performed correctly. And if they're not performed correctly, then men are also involved in the sinning that is a result of them not being performed correctly. So with challah, if the woman does not separate the challah, and if she doesn't take away the portion of the dough and leaves it in the challah, in the bread, then if anybody eats from it, then that person is sinning. Okay, and so let's say with challah nida, if the woman doesn't go to the mikveh when she's supposed to go, then also if she has sexual relations with someone, and that person is sinning as well if she didn't go to the mikveh, or if she didn't go at the right time, or whatever it is. And the third one is hadlakat ner, and this one was harder for me to figure out. But if she didn't light the candles at the right time and she lit them on Shabbat, then if anybody who benefits from that light is also sinning. So this source, it seemed to me that the rabbis wrote this source to be kind of, warning the women, if you have to be really careful about performing these mitzvot, because they were worried about how it would affect them as well. Another one is here. Why was she given the mitzvah of menstrual separation? Meaning, why was a woman given this mitzvah? This is a midrash. Leishit Rabbah. Okay, so why was she given the mitzvah of menstrual separation? Because she spilled the blood of the first Adam. Therefore, she was given the mitzvah of menstrual separation. And why was she given the mitzvah to sacrifice the first portion of the dough? That's challah. Because she spoiled the first Adam, who was the first portion of the world. Therefore, she was given the mitzvah to sacrifice the first portion of the dough. And why was she given the mitzvah of lighting the Shabbat lamp? Because she extinguished the soul of the first Adam. Therefore, she was given the mitzvah of lighting the Shabbat lamp. So, the woman caused mortality, you could say, because of, Gan Eden and, okay. So this is another source that I came into this project with having it in my head, which was that the idea that I had, what I had studied of the reason why women were given these mitzvot in the sources was as a punishment, for having caused Adam all this trouble. And so the idea is, that women brought sin into the world, therefore women have these mitzvot. Even though, often if I had asked, my teacher in high school or something, why do women have these mitzvot, you would have said, because they're so special, and women are so special, and women are better, and all those kind of things that you hear. But when you actually look in the sources, that's not what it says. So, as I said, I came into this project with this this baggage.
But also maybe there's a separation of dough. I was just trying to find a common element.
Yeah, the
separation of when it's clean and not clean or whatever. And also the separation as in the difference between lavdib and kodesh.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually that's in the English translation it says separation, and so that comes through more. Now another thing I didn't explain was the title of the book, which is Chanah's Voice. So Chanah is actually an acronym for these three women's mitzvot: Challah, Nida, and Hadlakat Ner. And they're called the Chanah mitzvot. Okay, and something else that I had in mind when I started this project was that the biblical Chanah, the story of Chanah, she is considered the mother of prayer. So there's the story when she was praying for a son. So she was in Shiloh and she was praying, and her lips moved, it says, but no voice came out. And for that she's praised, that she gets this to be the mother of prayer. And this bothered me, that there's this woman she was being praised for her silence. And so I saw this as this idea that I was going to be looking into these mitzvot and creating a relationship with them was also my project of sort of discovering Chanah's voice, or revealing Chanah's voice, or having her voice be heard. And so that's the idea I had in mind when I was starting this. So I didn't really know what I was going to come out with. It was sort of just starting the project. And so the first, so now the book is in 3 sections. It's in Challah, earth, nida, water, and hadlakat ner, fire. And so there's one element missing, air, right? And that's at the end. If I have time, I'll read the air section. Okay, so the introduction is called The Elements, and that's where I explain the project. And then the chala section. So the chala section deals a lot with, first of all, it deals with this group that I had, this challah baking group, where we were really trying to understand this, trying to connect to this mitzvah in a very deep way. And we had some really very amazing spiritual experiences. It was also during a time, if you remember this, of the Intifada, the second Intifada, and we were all also dealing with that on a daily basis. So a big part of what I also found in the mitzvah of challah at that time was this idea of a sfat emet that I found, where he talks about separating the challah or baking challah is also a way of lifting the mundane also in life, and he connects it with the spies. That because it says in the section in the Torah that tells you to separate the challah is juxtaposed with the story of the spies. And in that story, so the spies go into Israel and they see what's bad. And here we were experiencing this daily at the time that we had this challah baking group, and it was very, very strong for me. Then I don't know any of you who were living here at the time and or living here now. I mean, it's the same thing. Yeah, exactly. The constant question of like, what am I doing here? And I think I got part of the answer from the challah baking group, which was this idea that even the most basic thing of baking challah, that you kind of also you just sort of do your little part in trying to uplift the world, uplift life, uplift Israel, and also this idea of just trying to take the small things in life, what you can maybe have little control over, and try to make it holy. And that was something that I felt like we were really doing in the group. I'm not thinking of. So to give me a time so that
9:30.
9:30. Okay. So maybe because some of you were here, maybe I'll read that section of the. Okay. 11. Okay. 1 second. I wasn't planning to read this, but okay. My return to baking challah did not start in my home. A Rosh Chodesh women's group I belonged to disbanded, and a handful of us decided to form a new, smaller group in which we would explore the 3 women's mitzvot, challah, nida, and hadlakat ner. We called our group the Chanah group, using the traditional acronym for these 3 mitzvot, and thereby evoking the mother of both Samuel the prophet and prayer. We began with challah because we wanted something physical and tangible we could do together as a group. The first meeting, we baked chalot together and studied the rules of separating challah. We also practiced brima, a type of body work originating in Kurdistan that feels like a cross between yoga and massage. Yeah? Is that good? Working in pairs, we kneaded each other like kneading the dough. At our second meeting, we talked about possible meanings of this mitzvah of challah. The discussion was rich and provided much material to explore in future meetings. And the chalot came out better this time. We were becoming more skilled and were making spiritual headway. The third meeting, however, was the turning point. One of the women, Ruth, who was close to completing her rabbinic studies, led us in a healing chant while we kneaded our dough. El na lefana Allah, God, please heal her. These are the words of Moses when he pleads with God to heal his sister Miriam after she had been stricken for speaking harshly against him. Each of us brought into the healing circle the name of a woman who was either emotionally or physically ill, and we meditated on these women's names while we recited a chant lasting 18 minutes, the amount of time it takes to make Passover matzah, and the numerical equivalent of the Hebrew for life. At some point in the chanting, we lost ourselves in the rhythm of the chant and the kneading and entered a trance-like state. We felt energy flowing through us and bringing healing into the world. We then joined hands and sang the words of Psalm 90. Yehi Noam Adonai Eloheinu Aleinu, U'maseh Yadeinu Konena Aleinu, U'maseh Yadeinu Konenehu. May the favor of the Lord our God be upon us. Let the work of our hands prosper. Oh, prosper the work of our hands. We prayed that God accept our kneading as sacred work. We then separated the challah and recited the blessing in unison. Our feeling of partnership was strong. One woman pointed out that this is probably how challah making had been done in the past, by groups of women. In the past, before professional bakeries and supermarkets, women baked bread every day for their families. And baking bread then was a longer process than it is today, and was harder physically as well. It began with grinding the flour on a millstone. Doing it together would have helped them pass the time, helped them physically move the millstone with the power of a group, and turned what could have been a solitary drudgery into a time to share and connect. The experience of that morning had been powerful for us all. I intensely felt the healing energy and a strong connection to this ritual. Through our group effort, we had elevated this already holy act to an even higher plane. We had turned the act of baking and taking challah not only into a way of sanctifying the bread by giving back to God, but also of using the positive energy that flowed through us to constructively affect the world. That is the essence of what we as a group were trying to do, actualize this mitzvah on all levels. Performing a divine commandment to fulfill God's will is the basic level. An additional level is the spiritual meaning of the act, which includes studying and delving into the mitzvah. Then there is also the cosmic power inherent in the act itself, especially since we were doing it in a group. There is power in numbers in Jewish tradition. 2 witnesses are required to testify in a court of law or to sign personal status documents. 3 are required to publicly thank God for a meal. And a quorum of 10 is required to recite certain especially holy prayers. In this particular group, we created our own energy and let divine energy flow through us, affecting the world by coming together to perform this holy act. We decided that from then on we would chant while kneading and that we would take turns choosing and leading the chant. At the following meeting, another woman led us in a chant about releasing people from sticky situations. One woman was working with rye flour, having discovered that she was allergic to wheat flour. Rye flour is especially sticky. And so, as we chanted, we watched her literally turn her sticky goop into a nice ball of dough, fit for baking. Before my turn came to lead the chant, I considered which verse I wanted to use. That past Shabbat had been Tu B'Shvat, Jewish Arbor Day, and in honor of that holiday, Jacob and I had taken the kids on a bike ride along the side of a mountain on Friday afternoon, the eve of the holiday. The views were magnificent. It had been raining for 2 weeks straight. The almond trees were in full bloom, covered with light pink blossoms. It was breathtaking. After that experience, I wanted to sing praise to God, so I chose the verse, Hallelujah, Hallelujah, et Adonai min ha'aretz. Praise be God, let us praise God from the earth. The next time our group met, we stood around my friend's kitchen table, kneading and chanting, Hallelujah, Hallelujah, et Adonai min ha'aretz. Then, as each woman felt moved, she added a line about different aspects of the world that praise God by their very existence. The almond trees in full bloom after the rain, the full moon rising in the sky, the snow up on Mount Hermon, the Sea of Galilee full after years of drought, yeast bubbling in a mixing bowl, women kneading dough and praising God. When we finished chanting and wound down into some silent kneading, I was on a high. I felt connected to the earth and to the miraculous everyday physical wonders that surround me. I felt such a heightened sensitivity to the physical world that the sensations could only be described as spiritual. After cleaning the kitchen, we retreated to the living room. We sat down in a circle on our mats, and suddenly the whole house began to shake. We heard a loud noise, like something heavy falling in the next room. We were all silent for a moment, in shock, or perhaps wonder or fear. Then one woman who had lived for many years in Los Angeles said, "That was an earthquake." We all looked at her in disbelief. "Believe me, I know an earthquake when I feel one," she said. The thought crossed my mind, could God have sent the earthquake in response to our efforts? Could this be a replay of the earth that swallowed up the biblical Korach, who rebelled against Moses' authority, arguing that we are all holy? There was, after all, an anti-establishment feel to our work together. We were taking the power into our own female hands, chanting, creating spiritual energy, empowering ourselves as women to reclaim and reinterpret these ancient rituals for our modern feminist consciousness. But would God really seek to destroy us? We were, after all, simply a group of women getting together to bake challah. I decided to hear the message of the earthquake differently. Yes, the earth shifted beneath us, but it did not swallow us, because our egalitarian impulse was not Korach's sin. Rabbi Mordechai Liner, I guess is how you pronounce it, the Ishbitzer Rebbe, explains that Korach's claim that we are all holy is indeed true, even prophetic. All people are created in the image of God. Korach's problem was that he wasn't truly egalitarian. He and his followers were not sincerely calling for an end to hierarchy. They wanted to rule in place of Moses. Our group, on the other hand, had no desire to replace one hierarchy with another. Our goal was true egalitarianism. We were exploring an area of Jewish ritual that had been disparaged and undervalued by the patriarchy, and therefore also neglected by feminists like us. But our intention was not to prioritize the traditionally female rituals over the traditionally male rituals. We sought to integrate them all, degender them, and open them up to every human being alike. As women who felt comfortable in the traditionally male religious sphere, we wanted to become equally as comfortable in the traditionally female religious sphere, and we're hoping our male counterparts would follow suit. The dominance of the male approach had brought us only so far. It was time to integrate a fresh perspective into the picture. We had no intention of replacing a patriarchy with a matriarchy, but rather replacing a hierarchy with a true democracy, in which all voices are heard. So that was that section. I don't know if you all felt exactly the same way about it. You can tell me. That's how I experienced it. So that's the challah section. I mean, there's a lot more in it, obviously. And a big part of that section is about this idea of the degendering mitzvot, and where I'm claiming that that I came to this conclusion for myself that it wasn't just that women should be taking on mitzvot like tefillin and talit, if they felt inclined, not that every woman has to, but also that men should feel open to performing mitzvot that are more traditionally considered women's mitzvot, like baking challah, for instance. And in this book, at some point in the chapter, Jacob started to do baking challah with me at home, and in the prologue of the epilogue of the book, because this all happened quite a while ago. So I bring people up to date, and he actually is the challah baker in our house at this point. He became a vegan, how many years ago was it? Many years ago already. And I said, okay, if you're becoming a vegan, then you're baking the challah, because I don't know how to do vegan challah, and that was it. And since then, so, I mean, what do you think? It's at least 10 years maybe, I guess it is, or something. So he's been baking the challah, and he takes it really seriously. I mean, no matter what, like there could be an hour left before Shabbat's about to start, and he'll just somehow whip up a challah. So, I mean, that's part of the message of this book. Also is this idea that of opening up all mitzvot to everyone. Hannaton, and it's not the only one. It's sort of this whole revival of mikveh going on across the world, I guess, but mostly in America, really, of rethinking mikveh, reframing it as to be, and it's nothing new. I mean, it's just, the idea is just opening up mikveh in all its uses to anyone who wants to use it, so that women also going for spiritual reasons, doing all kinds of rituals, life transition rituals, just to go before Yom Kippur, before Shabbat, or whatever it be, which is actually, in Israel, is a big deal, because in Israel, the other mikvahot in the country will not allow a woman who's not married to come use the mikvah. So the Mikveh Hannaton, anyone can come, whether she's married or not, and men come as well. And there's a book, the top book on that pile is called Parashat Hamayim, and that's a book of mikveh rituals that was compiled by, I think, 4 Reform women rabbis in Israel, Israeli women rabbis, and which is a huge deal that coming out of the Reform movement, mikveh rituals, and in Israel. And that's all part of this revival of mikveh, of taking away some of the shame and the idea that it's about washing away the dirt and turning it into something which is, of course, it's extremely powerful ritual, a water renewal, reviving, transition kind of ritual. So, and I think that mikveh is a really good example of a way that by degendering something, it can really be a hidul mitzvah, can really beautify, is that hidul, is like to beautify, enhance the mitzvah too. Another example of that I have is of talit, where since we've had women taking on the mitzvah of talit, it's that you look around in Beit Knesset, and the kinds of talitot that people are wearing now, that all really started when women started wearing talit. And it's not just women though, you see men also wearing talit, that they spend a lot more time thinking about the kind of talit they want to be wearing. And I think that that's a really good example as well in the other direction of women taking it on. But I think also of men starting to think about going to mikveh regularly. I think you look at, there's a place in Boston called Mayim Chayim in Massachusetts, which is a mikveh very much like the one in Hannaton, but it's, they have a lot more money, and it's beautiful, beautiful mikveh. And it's just a whole new concept of mikveh. You have the whole community, first of all, being very open about, here's this mikveh, it's not hidden anywhere. And you have people going for all kinds of purposes, and it's really, I think, people worry about degendering mitzvot because they worry that then nobody's going to want to do them. I mean, I've heard that many times. You hear that also about in the synagogue, women starting to making things egalitarian, or women becoming rabbis, or women leading services, that the men aren't going to want to come anymore. And so, I mean, sometimes that actually, it's a true phenomenon on some level, but I think that you see enough examples of if it's done right, that it really ends up just enhancing the mitzvah more. Okay, so there's another part in the bathing section, well, bathing, because bathing, brightening. So baking is challah, bathing is mikveh, and brightening is lighting Shabbat candles. In the bathing section, I also talk about another way of degendering mikveh, which was that, okay, which was when I also, during that year, I also came to this conclusion that I wanted my husband, Jacob, to start going to the mikveh when I would go monthly. And this was after I had a series of miscarriages, and whatever, I mean, you can read it in the book. It felt to me that that was the right thing, and I think I'd been thinking about it for a number of years of like, why am I the one who has to go to mikveh every month? And even though I actually love mikveh, I love water, that's, I have like a very, very deep connection with mikveh, but still it didn't feel right to me that here's this mitzvah that we were thinking of as something we're doing together, not the actual mikveh part, but everything else around it. And a decision we had made together to follow these laws, and so I said to him that I want him to start to go with me to mikveh, and so we went to a spring, and thank you. We went to the spring in Halavan, which is in Malta, and that became, until we moved to Hannaton, that became our monthly ritual that we would go there together. Also I can take questions too. I think I'll read you part of that too. Okay. Anything else? Okay. A few months after my miscarriage ritual, I conceived again, but this pregnancy too ended in miscarriage. After 2 miscarriages in 6 months, I asked Jacob to do something I had wanted him to do since we were first married. Immerse alone with me before we resumed sexual relations. Well, actually, I wanted to read this little part that was right before. The Midrash tells us that after Adam and Eve were expelled from the Garden of Eden, Adam immersed in the Gihon River, which flowed out from the garden. Adam did this to repent for his sin of eating from the tree of knowledge. Perhaps he chose this specific river with its direct connection back to Eden because he was hoping God would remove his sin and return him to paradise. So he stood there with the water up to his neck for 7 days, begging God to accept his repentance. According to the author of this Midrash, Eve was not the only one who sinned. Adam too was at fault. It is not only the women who need to make amends for the state of our imperfect world. It is not only women who need to immerse and be reborn. It is not only women who need to experience the cleansing, purifying, renewing feeling of total submersion in the living waters. After 7 days, God accepted Adam's repentance. But this did not mean sending him back to Eden. There was no turning back. Adam did not realize that the river's current flows in only one direction, out of Eden. He did not understand that each time we are reborn, we are born anew. We cannot go backwards. We can only go forwards. Water can purify, but it cannot erase what was. It can transform and transition and serve as a pathway into the future, but it cannot lead us back into the past. So then I say what we read before. Okay, so I asked Jacob to immerse with me. After all, he was just as tameh as I was, not only from contracting my tumah, by sitting on the same chair I sat on, for instance, but also from other forms of tumah, even some of which originated in his own body, such as tumah contracted from seminal emissions. Tumah is a spiritual consciousness of the cycles of spiritual highs and lows, openness and closure that we all experience in our lives. Is this tumah consciousness relevant to only women today? I think not. Men too can benefit from tapping into these spiritual rhythms. For a variety of reasons, some technically halachic and some ideologically misogynist in nature, post-temple Jewish religious culture has channeled all of its tumah energy towards women, so that we have contained it more or less on our own since the destruction of the temple. This has been both a blessing and a curse. Jewish women over the ages have been both uplifted and dragged down spiritually by this responsibility. The time had come for men and women alike to share in this experience, I decided. While I was well aware of the fact that the sexual prohibition attached to the nidah applies only to the woman's tumah status, the notion of us reuniting in a state of mutual tahara appealed to my longing for balance between me and Jacob in relation to this mitzvah, and for a more general balance between what has traditionally been called feminine and what has traditionally been called masculine. Masculine spiritual experience in the world. Moreover, when I immersed alone, it was difficult for me to turn my focus and intention away from my desires for another child. Since the last miscarriage, I had been focusing my thoughts on my marital relationship instead of my fertility issues while immersing, and this had been a powerful change for me. But after yet another miscarriage, I knew this would be more challenging. If Jacob were there with me, it would be different. His presence would help me shift the focus of my immersion from my own biology to something positive and enduring, something that went beyond my frustrations with pregnancy to mine and Jacob's everlasting love. I was not looking to replace the ritual celebrating and marking my menstrual cycle. This was an important aspect of my immersion experience. Dunking beneath the living waters was precious to me. Yet I was looking now to add a new dimension to my monthly immersions. I wanted this ritual to take on new meanings as I felt my life moving into a new phase. Since the men's and women's mikvahot are separate and not open during the same times of day, the women's mikvah is open only at night and the men's only during the day, And since a major reason for asking Jacob to immerse was that I wanted us to immerse together, our only option was to go to a natural spring, pool, river, lake, or to the ocean. So on the night of the 7th clean day after my blood flow stopped, I explained the difference between if you're a zava or if you're a nida, it's in the book. And after a miscarriage, you're considered a zava, and then you have to wait the 7 clean days. Anyway, if you read the book, you'll okay? Jacob and I set out to Ein Halavan, literally the White Spring, which is about a 20-minute drive from our home, and has beautiful views of the surrounding Jerusalem hills. At Ein Halavan, the water comes from an underground source. There are 2 springs, one shallow and one deep. This is one of Jerusalem's answers to a watering hole, and people flock to this and other similar pools in the heat of summer. This was not the heat of summer, though. It was March, and while the days were warm, the nights were cold. When we arrived at Ein Halavan, towels in hand, it was dark. It was Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the beginning of the month the Israelites left Egypt. So there was only a sliver of a moon, but the stars were bright. They looked bigger than usual, giving the impression that we were closer to the heavens. In the dark, we climbed a long flight of stone steps in order to reach the springs. I was still in a state of ritual impurity and therefore sexually off-limits, so we were still not touching. Therefore, we walked without holding hands, Jacob leading the way with a flashlight. When we reached the water's edge, my nostrils filled with a mossy, mucky smell. I looked into the pool. The water looked black, and I saw some leaves and branches floating on the surface. I wonder how cold it is, I said. Put your hand in. I put my hand in. It was cold. I removed my fleece sweatshirt, my foam shoes, and my sweatpants. Once undressed, I sat on the edge of a rock with my feet in the water. Okay, I said, are you watching? You have to make sure I go completely under. Then I jumped, swam out into the center of the pool, and dunked my whole body beneath the water. It wasn't freezing, but it was quite cold, so I decided to forego my custom of dunking 7 times. I swam back to the rocks and pulled myself out of the water. Once I had a towel around me, I recited the blessing. Okay, it's your turn now, I said. How cold was it? Not so bad, really. But you're a water person. You don't mind this. You like it. I, on the other hand, go ahead. Jacob came to where I was standing on a stone ledge by the water, and he removed his sweatshirt, slip-on shoes, jeans, the things I do for you, he said as he jumped. Then he yelped, it's freezing, and dumped into the water. As I watched Jacob immerse, I thought of Adam up to his neck in water. The rabbis created Eve as our model of atonement for the world's imperfections. We were given the Nidah ritual as a means to atone for Eve's having caused Adam's death, the Midrash tells us. But they also created a parallel model in Adam, it seems. I felt that the time was right to give Adam his fair chance at mikveh. This felt to me now like a way to repair the damage that had been perpetuated throughout the years that Tumah-related rituals, aside from Nidah, fell into disuse, and only women became associated with Tumah. By insisting that men immerse too before a couple can sexually reunite, it becomes a ritual about the couple's purification for each other and the renewing of their sexual relationship. And on a higher cosmic level, mikveh immersion can be a ritual about mutual atonement and a step together in cooperation toward repairing our broken world. By bringing Jacob into this ritual in a practical, tangible way, we performed a tikkun, a corrective, on the gender imbalance that exists in so many ways in our society. The more men and women invade and join together in each other's spaces, the better our society will become. And it goes on. And at the end, we're walking back, and I say to him, well, that wasn't so bad, Jacob said, as he wrapped me in an embrace. I know I'll be looking forward to coming here again next month. I, too, would be looking forward to coming here next month, and for many more months in the future. It was hard for me to believe that I had been going to an indoor institutional mikveh alone for all these years. This felt so clearly the way this ritual should be performed. I don't want to say this is how it was meant to be performed, because I am sure this is not what the rabbis intended, husband and wife skinny dipping on mikveh night. But in our paradigm, this felt like the most appropriate way to carry out this ancient mitzvah. I became able to see a meaningful future for me in relation to this mitzvah. A future without childbirth wasn't so bad after all, although I ended up having 2 more kids after that, but one adopted and one natural, biological. Outings like this one would be easier with no babies at home. It would be like returning to our dating and honeymoon days. So you do this again? Mikveh and all asked him, wondering if Jacob felt akin to Adam immersing in the Gichon. It's not as if I imagined he could ever feel compelled to stand up to his neck in water for 7 days. But the fact that he mentioned coming here again next month convinced me that he was beginning to feel connected to this mitzvah. Mikveh and all was his answer. So, let's see. So, I'm just thinking anything else from that part I should talk about. So I just passed this part where we did the wedding ceremony again. That was okay. And I think that decision to ask him to start coming to mikveh with me made me start rethinking a lot of gender imbalance kind of aspects of Jewish law and the wedding ceremony as well, where it's unilateral and it's the man acquiring the woman, or the whole idea of Kiddushin is totally one-sided, and that's why we have the problem of get, which that's where I know Judith from. And so it was during this year that I also came to the conclusion that the wedding ceremony should be changed to eliminate Kiddushin, the kinyan altogether, and that we should create a new ceremony. And since then, I've performed some that are are very Jewish, chuppah and all, and rings, but one was without a ring, but where there isn't this act of the man doing kinyan the woman, and instead there's other things you can do, other things you can say, based on shutfut, also the laws of shutfut, of partnership, and so that this chapter ends with another thing I asked Jacob to do. I asked him to do a lot of strange things. Was to first I said to him that I wanted him to give me a get, and I wanted us to start, fresh and do a new ceremony. And he refused to do that, and he was actually insulted. And he really actually took that really hard. So I felt bad about that. And then, but in the end, it was for our anniversary. We were in Keturah when Susan was living there. And I surprised him, and we did a whole ceremony, a new ceremony, and with our kids, and yes, and Susan, who were my Sadara Kedushin, and so that was very special. And so that was, I felt like I was at least doing the ceremony that I felt comfortable with. And then this was all during that year, before getting smicha. And the last section is about Shabbat candlelighting, and whereas the middle section is more about places where I guess I saw maybe like injustice in halacha, and I was really struggling with that. And the last section, candlelighting, is more about where I saw, where I felt like sometimes the halacha or the ritual was not in tune with I guess my spiritual experience. So I used Shabbat to talk a lot about that. I know a lot of people find Shabbat to be like the easiest mitzvah to relate to, but I sometimes have trouble with Shabbat, especially when it's dealing with the very minutiae details of what you can't do, and I prefer often to kind of think about like what I want to do on Shabbat and how I want to experience my Shabbat, and sometimes I would get caught up in a lot of the details of what I couldn't do, and I felt like it was making my Shabbat difficult, and so I deal with that in that chapter, and through that a lot of the issues of my own feelings about halacha. There's one section that actually, because Eliza's here, and Cheryl, where also there's during this year that I was at Women of the Wall. When I lived in Jerusalem, I was very involved with Women of the Wall, and this a woman who's not here, Batya Kalish, was saying Kaddish for her mother, and I don't know were you here for that, Ruth? And we came to this conclusion that she should say Kaddish at the Kotel, and that was the first time that we actually had a woman at the kotel saying Kaddish, even though it was just a group of women. So we were kind of like creating an actual minyan of women, and that was during that year where I felt like it was just like a moment where we had to decide on the spot, you know, like, should she say Kaddish? And we just felt like, of course, you know, like, of course, the Shekhinah, which is the reason for having a minyan, is to bring down God's presence. And we felt like, for sure, with these 10 women, we were bringing down God's presence. And so, I mean, at this point in my life, so now I live in Kibbutz Hannaton, and I'm completely egalitarian. When I wrote this book, I was involved with Shiur and Shmooze. I was one of the founders of Shiur and Shmooze, and I was really wrestling with the whole issue of egalitarianism and how far to push it and how far I was willing to go with it. And it was during this year, the writing of this book, that I really came to the conclusion that I felt like it was time for full egalitarianism, and it's all in here. That's actually the one part of the book where I really, there's two parts where I have a halakhic discussion, and there's that, and there's something about swimming on Shabbat as well. And I think I will, I want to take some questions out of it. I think I'll just read this last, the elements part, the air part, because I was just at my friend, right now I just dropped off a copy of the book at my friend Bon Haberman, who lives down the road, and this is something that happened in her garden, right down the road. Okay, so another group I belonged to when I was living in Jerusalem was a Kiddush Levana group that started with Aliza, right?
Bana, really, I think.
Right, but I think before Bana joined, I think I was doing it with you. And anyway, it was started out as being a women's group, and you'll see, and then in the end it ended up including men as well, which is part of kind of the whole idea of this book. And when I said that I started the project, I didn't really know where it was leading me. And there's, and I think that is where it led me pretty much, was this idea that part of this idea of including Chanah's voice in the story. Hi. Okay. Is this idea of opening everything up to men and to women as well, and that it's very, I mean, I spent a lot of years in women's groups, and at least for me personally, having gone through that experience of many years in women's groups, I felt like it was time to bring that energy out into the whole, you know, the world with men as well, and invite men into the women's groups and have women in men's spaces as well. So anyway, here's this section. Hello. This is Shafa. Okay. She had a long day at the zoo and all kinds of stuff. All right. I am standing outside in my friend's garden, beneath a dark, hazy sky, surrounded by grapevines, fig, olive, date, and pomegranate trees. This is a Garden of Eden in the city of Jerusalem. I am here with my friends, men and women alike. We gathered here one by one as the sky grew dark and Shabbat left us to recite the prayer for the new moon, Kiddush Levana. There is a strong tradition of women refraining from saying this prayer that is traditionally recited on the first Saturday night of each month. In fact, to this day, it is rare to see women reciting Kiddush Levana. The prayer is not even included in the new Art Scroll Women's Siddur, an Orthodox prayer book which came out in the year 2005. According to Rabbi Isaiah Horowitz, the same 16th century Kabbalist and scholar who records the tradition of women reciting Chanah's prayer after lighting the Shabbat candles, that's in the Shabbat candle section, women do not recite Kiddush Levana because of their shame. For it was Eve, the first and archetypal woman, who caused the blemish to the moon. The Babylonian Talmud, Tractate Hulin 60a, relates that the moon and the sun were once of equal brilliance. But the moon complained that two rulers cannot wear one crown, so God ordered her to make herself smaller. According to Rabbi Horowitz, this shrinking of the moon, the imperfection of the world, at its root was caused by Eve's introduction of sin into the human narrative. She listened to her evil inclination, and because of this, the world is now imperfect. We were exiled from paradise, the Garden of Eden, where there was no sin, and sent out into the world outside of the garden, where good and evil both exist. This was all because of Eve, because of women. But the picture is more complex than that. Later on, at the incident of the golden calf, tradition has it that the women ignored their evil inclinations and did not join in the sin. According to one midrash, they were rewarded for the celebration of Rosh Chodesh, rewarded with the celebration of Rosh Chodesh, the new moon, for not having participated in the sin of the golden calf. Women redeemed themselves, at least on some level, and so we were given this gift. Yet, Rabbi Horowitz says, we women are still too ashamed to come out and bless the new moon, since we did cause its blemished state after all. Even if we are helping to remedy the situation, even if we are working to fight off our evil inclinations, we were the ones who invited the evil inclination into the world in the first place. The Jerusalem Talmud, Tractate Shabbat, Chapter 2, page 5, column 2, provides a similar explanation for why women were given the 3 women's mitzvot of Chala, Nidan, Habakat, Taner. Because Eve caused Adam's death and brought mortality into the world, women must make up for this by performing these 3 mitzvot, each of which is symbolic of Adam's death in some way. Then I quote what I quoted before, I won't read it again. After studying these sources, I decided to personally take on the practice of reciting Kiddush Levanah each month. The way I read it, the midrash that tells the story of the moon's diminishment is actually an attempt to tell the story of the creation of patriarchy, hierarchy, oppression, and hegemony in the world. The midrash places the blame for her diminished state on the moon herself. After all, she complains about having to share the rain. In other words, according to this midrash, those who are oppressed are guilty for their own oppression, their own lack of power. But the blame is not completely on the moon. It was God who told her to make herself smaller. The fact that the midrash and Rabbi Horowitz put the blame for the imperfection of the world and humanity completely on women is twisted logic. It's blaming the victim and blaming the powerless. Women are not the ones, or at least not the only ones, who brought the world to its present disastrous state where might is right. Are we really to believe that we are ashamed to face the moon because it reminds us of our guilt in creating our own oppression? I think rather that men were afraid of what might happen were we to pray by the light of the moon for its restoration to its original grandeur. We might be reminded of our connection to the moon. We might be reminded of what the moon symbolizes for us: muted power, fuzzier lines, shared light. We might also be reminded of God's promise in Isaiah 30:26, which is referred to in the prayer of Kiddush Levanah, the promise that one day God will renew the moon and make the 2 lights equal in power. I think this idea scared the men in power, and so they discouraged women from reciting this prayer, as they discouraged our involvement with various other mitzvot that could interfere with men's religious expression and threaten men's ultimate control over women and society in general. And for the mitzvot that were unavoidably the domain of women, Chala, Nidan, Habakat, Taner, the fear of losing power took another form. Since women were the ones who baked the bread, experienced the cycle of fertility, and were in the home when it was time to light Shabbat candles, men had to trust women to perform these mitzvot properly. But this terrified them, since if the women did not perform them meticulously, the men too would be stricken with such severe punishments as death at the hands of God or being cut off from the nation. Thus, the need to threaten women to be extremely scrupulous lest they die in childbirth. Kiddush Levanah is traditionally recited in a group. With my newfound understanding of the origin of women's distancing from the prayer, I organized a group of women to recite it with me each month. This went on for about 6 months. Then, a friend who had become a co-organizer of this group asked if I would mind if we opened the group to men. I thought about this and decided that it was a great idea. After all, the moon's imperfection symbolized for the rabbis the general imperfect nature of the world. Restoring the moon to its former glory is symbolic of a general fixing of the world. When we ate from the tree of knowledge and chose to be partners with God in ongoing creation, we became, like God, in need of Shabbat. We too needed to learn to rest from the exhausting work of trying to fix our imperfect world, of trying to restore the moon to her former glory, to balance moon and sun, Shabbat and Chol, Gvula and Chesed, willfulness and willingness, and bring a certain wholeness that is missing now from the world. When we accomplish that, our work will be done and we will have no more need for Shabbat, because life will be one long Shabbat, a transformed Shabbat, a Shabbat that incorporates and balances these two forces to the perfect measure so that it itself is transformed, a day that is all Shabbat. In order to reach that day that is all Shabbat, we will have to figure out together how to share the crown. Don't fall. Renewing the moon means the end of the power struggle that, according to the Midrash, caused the inequality of power that exists in the world in the first place. It means a transformed reality, the introduction of a new way of looking at the world. A renewal of the moon means women being transformed by men, and men being transformed by women, and sun and moon in balance. The first time we recited Kiddush Levanah as a mixed gender group, I felt validated in our decision to invite men. When we began, the moon was covered by a haze. We could see her just enough to recite the prayer, but barely. But when we came to the part of the prayer when we were meant to leap up and try to reach the moon, she started to shine through the haze. It was as if the light of the moon burned a hole in this curtain that was muting her radiance, and she became surrounded by a bright yellow halo, which expanded as we continued to dance and sing. The moon was renewing herself before our eyes, but not in the usual monthly way. She was actually breaking through a barrier with her light, a reflection of the light of the sun. The two powers together broke through the haze that had clouded our vision. Together their lights became a porthole to the divine. Questions? Yeah.
Regarding the marriage ceremony that you're revisioning, is that accepted by the Orthodox establishment? No, I mean, in other words, will they not going to register your marriage?
No, I mean, anyway, they wouldn't register my marriage, even if I was doing a totally traditional ceremony in Israel, they would not.
So those people don't emerge with the necessary documentation to claim whatever?
So what anybody who marries in this country that doesn't do it through the Rabbanut, what they do is if they want to be registered, which they don't, you don't have to be registered to marry. If you want to be registered as married, then you can go outside the country and do a civil ceremony, and then you come back and register as married, and then
another country. Because otherwise, if they don't do that, isn't there a problem with the children marrying Orthodox and all this stuff?
No,
no
because they're not considered mamzerim.
Not mamzerim, but there's other stages of mamzerut. Yeah.
No.
There's no problem.
No problem.
Okay. The other question is about this book, the 4 Reform Rabbis, Parshat Hamayim. Is there anything controversial in there from the Orthodox point of view?
Has the book been?
Yeah, no, their rulings, the things they're saying.
It's a collection of. It's a collection of ceremonies, really. So it's a collection of ceremonies to do in water.
Oh, it's not about dimensions of a mikveh or any of that stuff.
No, you can take a look at it afterwards. It's a beautiful book, actually. I use a lot of the ceremonies at the mikveh.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yeah, I do.
Haviva, like you, I consider myself to be a progressive egalitarian. I go to Masorti Minyan. Not progressive enough, maybe in your view, but I very much admire your sentiments. The Siddur that we read from does not have Amen Madlikin. We find that Siddur, that section, to be highly infectious. And there are parts of Nayahadut which are misogynist. I am surprised how you can marry, being an egalitarian, and still accept these highly anti-feminist, misogynist sentiments in Yahadut. I think you're having your cake and eating it.
Well, I don't. I mean, I'm rejecting them, but I'm wrestling with it. I mean, they're in the tradition, so I guess, and a big part of it for me was having grown up with this, having grown up Orthodox and feeling it was part of my experience, my Jewish experience. I couldn't really separate it. I mean, now I don't consider those texts I'm very, I have no problem criticizing them at all, and I criticize them in the book. But I did still feel that they informed a lot of my own feelings about what it meant to be a Jewish woman. I don't feel like it does now, but I did need to deal with it, which is part of what I was doing in the book. So yeah, I mean, I don't consider myself Orthodox anymore. I mean, that's part of the reason, but it is a big part of my Jewish experience.
You said you were ordained by an Orthodox rabbi. What is this?
How do you feel about it?
I'm sorry, I'm ignorant, but who was this rabbi that worked?
So his name is Rabbi Aryeh Strakovsky. He lives in Jerusalem, and he hasn't given ordination to anyone since. So I'm not sure that he.
Is he an authority, a critical authority in the Rabbanut, or is he just a learned rabbi?
Just a learned rabbi, yeah.
So he studied at YU, didn't he? And didn't he teach at YU?
Yeah, I mean, he's a very
well-recognized, respected.
Yeah.
Was it like a Rabbanut, like
But
test you had to take?
I didn't know, so I didn't do the Rabbanut
So what does it mean that
test.
you were ordained?
Well, traditionally that is what ordination really was just a rabbi.
A rabbi drilling you on halakha and you regurgitated them.
Yeah.
So we could all really be. Whoever went to Jewish day school.
I spent a lot of years studying, and that was part of the process. Was also, coming to the feeling that I came to and that he did, that I was ready to move on, to whatever it was that I was going to be giving to the world through my ordination. But I think, honestly, he probably regrets it. He's a very quiet man, and he didn't really welcome the publicity that went around it. And
What year was that?
that's a good question.
A long time.
We were still in Jerusalem. We were
It's like 15.
It was like our first year. 8 years ago, something like that. 10 years ago.
It's more than 8 years ago.
8 years ago. Why did he do it? Because he really felt that there was no reason, halakhically, that he could give to say that a woman can't receive ordination. And he believed in that, and I'm sure he still does.
But did you think you could be a apostate? Do you think you could be a second?
He is a postate because he did my
He
husband.
is.
He's a
Could be a plus second? Yeah, he would.
Or an
He
ed
would
and
say a plus second.
and a vintage flat and all that.
No, he wouldn't. He didn't make any statements about egalitarian to be lower or anything like that. He was based on my learning.
Text.
But he did say to me, I mean, he teaches at Pardes, which, he's very well aware of the non-Orthodox world also, and I think he would feel comfortable, with people taking their rabbinate out into the world and teaching, even not in an Orthodox setting. But, he himself was quite in that Orthodox world.
First of all, I went to the mikveh for the first time, and hopefully not the last, on Hannaton, and I was totally moved by the fact that there wasn't a mikveh lady or anything like that, and I could just do whatever I wanted, and it was a really spiritual experience. And what I was also moved by were the brachot that I think you and other people wrote to do with, I remember a woman after she's divorced, a woman after when, all different times of her life. Which was really beautiful. Where did you get those, or did you make them up? And the second question is, but they're really, really beautiful, and thank you just for that experience. And also you said that in most mikvahs, men and women, they're a separate mikvah. Do you have that, or you just have different times, and what's the official halakha for that?
So we just have we don't have different times for men and women. Everybody comes by appointment. So just whether you're a man or a woman, you have to make an appointment and you come. Okay, so that the English ones, the Hebrew ones, are in that book mostly. The English rituals that you saw are ceremonies. I have this whole packet from my employee in Massachusetts. They have these laminated ceremonies that are really very moving. And so that's probably what we were talking about. They were in English for like really every life transition event, and also before the Chagim. And I actually, when I weaned her not long ago, I did a weaning ceremony, and which was really, I used theirs, and also what I encourage a lot of people to do when they come to me and say, I want to do this kind of ceremony or whatever, as I say, well, you can look through everything that I have, but also you should come with your own kavanot, where you can write things down that you want to think about when you go in the water, you can bring a song, you can, you don't even have to use any of the ceremonies that we have. You can think about each time you go under what it is, what kind of kavanah you want to have, and often that's very traditional actually, and that's what in Kabbalah and Chassidut, that's what they would do. They have these kavanot. So even like that book or the packet of rituals that you saw from Mayim Chaim is really just a modern version of kavanot, of Kabbalistic kavanot and Hasidic kavanot. So even though it's like it seems kind of like whatever New Age, but it's really very old age. What else did you ask me about men and women coming different hours? So that's just by appointment. But interestingly, when I first went to Hannaton, and I went to meet with the rabbi from the Motzad Datit of Emek Yisrael, which is where Hannaton is, and I told him that the mikveh had hardly been used. Like there were not many people living in the kibbutz anymore, and I came to him and said, I want to revive this mikveh. And so he said, well, if you have my blessing, whatever, just a few things you have to not do, which of course I couldn't. So one was, no men should go in the mikveh. I said to him, why? I don't understand. There's no reason why men can't go in the mikveh. And he said, because the women aren't going to want to go in if they know that men went in the water.
Yeah. I was going to say this, I know a place where there's a shared mikveh, and they change the water, but the women are sort of changing the water because they're scared of there being some sperm there and they can become
Yes, so I was going to say that in Shmaya, which is a yishuv that's 10 minutes away from us,
yes.
They have an only women's mikveh, but before Yom Kippur they let the men come during the day on Erev Yom Kippur, and they change the water after the men use it.
This one's in Krakow in Poland, where
really?
a lot of Hasidim go there, but when they have women around, a lot of very frum women, they have to organise it.
So I thought that was really interesting too, because our mikveh, we have a filter, and there's chlorine in it even, it's like a...
Kill that sperm.
But what is the halakha? The halakha.
Men using the same mikveh. There's no, there are some even that have men and women using the same one just at different times of day. There's no reason why they can't. Okay. It's just this, that's the only answer I could give you was that he was afraid it would, whatever, women, it would push women away from using mikveh, and his main concern is that married women come to the mikveh. That's all he cared. He said that to me. He said this mikveh should be for married women to come once a month, and that's it. The other thing is conversions. So all of the conversions that are not through the Rabbanut in this country, who don't go to the ocean, they come to Hannaton and do the mikveh. And he said not to do that as well. What else did he say? He said, nobody's so unmarried women, all of that, and like I didn't agree to that. But a nice thing about that though is that even though I didn't agree to it, he still, they still would give us a little bit of help with things with the mikveh. They were giving us oil to heat the mikveh. The Misrad Datot, or it's called Misrad Shelut Hadat, which is the national office of religious services in this country, they don't recognize our mikveh and they don't help us out. So every time we've had something, we've raised some money on our own, but other things we've gone to the regional religious council, which is this rabbi, is the Rabbi Zamir is the chief rabbi, whatever, of Emek Yisrael, which doesn't have that many religious yeshuvim or kibbutzim anyway, but he, what was I saying about it? Wait a minute. So they were giving us oil, like little things, and then right now, we just started today a renovation of the mikveh that they're actually paying for. They gave us a new heating system, which it was this very antiquated heating system. Also, when we wanted a filter, I forgot to say that. It took a few years, but I kept calling and calling and calling. And the other mikveh had filters, and we were changing the water every few weeks. We didn't have a filter. And finally, and I kept saying, it's such a waste of water, such a waste of water. And finally, they took money from their own regional council budget and got us a filter. And now they're doing the same thing to give us a new heating system and some new tiles in the mikveh. So it's actually a really nice kind of, and to that story, the relationship with them. And I'm sure they know what goes on in the mikveh because it's not a secret. But I think in the end, they're glad that there's a mikveh there that's being used, and so yeah. But Misgarah Datot still does not recognize our mikveh. Anything else?
Right. So, any more questions? I'm sure that Haviva will also speak to you after we cut the camera, and you're also going to be selling your books for 50 shekels. Thank you once again, Judith and Zach. And don't forget that tzedakah is Lotem, which is helping the people with disabilities to get out and about into nature. Great tzedakah. Thank you very much.
Just one more comment. You're talking about binding a woman's Kiddush Lebanon. Well, this week is the time for it. So if any woman has not yet said, I said it on my list. If any woman or man here hasn't said Ritual and Lebanon, just go out in the garden. This is the week.